Hey everyone, so we're double dipping in videos today. We're going to put out another guide for Rift of Chaos, but today we're going to do the water boss. So a day or two ago I did the earth boss, so if you haven't seen that, go check that out on my channel. That's kind of the first one we go over. But today we're going to be talking about the water boss. So to recap, all of the bosses in Rift of Chaos, they have different mechanics from stages 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12. For stages 1 through 4 is kind of where you have the baseline mechanics, and then from stages 5 to 12, they add additional mechanics on top of it. Now, all of these stages have some kind of stat requirement, to go before the boss, which is really important to a certain mechanic. You're going to need specific focus and resistance depending on the boss. And today, for the water boss is very dependent on hitting certain focus and resistance requirements in order to have a successful team, unless you have one of the characters that makes things really, really easy. So one thing I do want to mention from the wood boss is I've had a couple people who are more engaged with Rift of Chaos. They've done more runs than me. They have a little more knowledge. They said that the focus requirement actually isn't 150, it's 160. So I apologize for that. And I made the update for this video. I think whenever I was building my characters for 150 focus, I must have had some kind of relic on them that allowed their focus to increase, and really wasn't paying attention to that. So my bad on that. As always, the resistance for positive affinity heroes needs to be 210. And then your speed requirement for stage 12 needs to be 225 or up. Okay? And as always, the requirements are reduced somewhere between 5 and 10 per stage. So I have the main things to watch out for on this boss on this sticky note. As always, I will put it up on my Discord in the threads there, but we're going to talk about some of those mechanics here today. So let's talk about this a little bit. So the water boss, okay? These are the mechanics that you need to look out for. So his first ability here is Frost Strike. It says at the end of each round deals true damage to all enemies, and if the enemy has fewer than 4 positive effects, it applies Frozen to that enemy for 1 turn. So unlike the wood boss, who does an attack at the start of the round, the water boss does an attack at the end of each round. And he'll deal true damage to anybody who doesn't have, he'll deal true damage to anybody. And then if they don't have more than 4 positive effects, he's going to apply Frozen to them. So this is kind of a tough thing to get around. There's only a couple heroes that allow you to stack a whole bunch of positive effects on your team members. Some heroes that are really, really good in this Rift of Chaos, they can put positive effects on themselves. Those are the real good ones. Thankfully, though, this mechanic has a couple different ways to get around it. You don't necessarily need to have the 4 positive effects. This Frozen can actually be resisted, which is why that 210 resistance is really important for those positive affinity heroes. So the Frozen can be completely resisted as long as you have 210 resistance on all of your heroes, if you're not able to put up the 4 positive effects. The resistance on those heroes actually is really important for the second mechanic, but we'll get to that here in a second. So being able to resist the Frozen is a nice thing. 4 positive effects to be able to not even worry about the Frozen is nice, but right now we only have like 1 character that does that, and it doesn't even do it that well, and that's Muriel. And I'll talk about some of the heroes here at the end of the video. And then, of course, if you live under a rock, you don't know who Ackerly is, which is one of the most crazy heroes that we have in the game for PvE content. Ackerly puts up an immunity buff on himself and the entire team for 2 turns, so there is a way to kind of get around this Frozen with Ackerly, because you're going to end up killing the boss pretty quick with Ackerly anyway. But again, we'll talk about that here in a second. So, talking about the resistance here. Second ability, called Frozen Seal. It said at the start of each round, it applies 3 stacks of Frozen Seal to all enemies that last until the end of the round. Each stack of Frozen Seal reduces the enemy's damage by 25%, and 1 stacks are removed when the enemy attacks in their default turn. Now, this used to be a really important mechanic, and it still kind of is, but there was a really easy way to get around this boss, and then they nerfed it. It was going to be nerfed completely, but then they kind of walked it back and still allowed this to take place. But they reduced the amount of damage dealt by the boss. Now, I'll unpack that a little bit. So this Frozen Seal counts as a debuff. So that means that you're able to send it back to the boss and have the boss have this Frozen Seal on him, which is really nice because it reduces the boss's damage that he deals to you. Now here, it says it reduces the enemy's damage by 25%. So if it has 3 stacks, it should be 75%, and that's what they nerfed. If you are bouncing this Frozen Seal debuff back to the boss, whenever he has stacks on him, it's only 10% per stack. So it will reduce his damage by 30%, which is still strong. It's just a lot less strong than what it used to be. In regards to the damage that is dealt by your heroes, I would say that it's kind of negligible, especially for most of the teams, because the damage dealers either attack multiple times per turn, or they have the ability to do true damage based on max health, or you're doing damage on damage over time. So the Frozen Seal reducing your damage is kind of negligible, to be honest. But the importance of the Frozen Seal is the fact that you can bounce this back to the boss. This is where the focus part of the stat requirements come in, needing 160% focus. There are a couple heroes that actually deflect that Frozen Seal back on this boss. One of them is Seema, and again, we'll talk about those heroes here in a second, and then Foodie, which is really good. So those are like the 2 main ways to beat the boss, is 1, deflecting the Frozen Seal back, or 2, you end up just killing the boss with damage over time, poisons with Ackerly. So like all the other Rift of Chaos bosses, they also have this counterattack ability where if you go after the boss, it'll counterattack you and kill you. So as long as you're above the 225 speed on stage 12, and then so on and so forth at the lower stages, as long as you're going before the boss, you can completely ignore this mechanic. So this boss does have something that is kind of added on to its ultimate ability called Arctic Shield. And whenever it casts that ability, it puts up this huge shield on itself, and it reduces its crit resistance by, well, it increases its crit resistance by 100 and reduces your crit abilities by 100% until it's broken. This is a really huge shield. Thankfully, there are plenty of heroes in the Earth element that can remove or steal this shield, and we'll talk about them here in a second. But if you're running them, which you're going to need to do anyway, because they're mainly damage dealers or support heroes, so that's just something that you're going to do regardless. It's kind of nice that they overlap. So I would say that this isn't really a huge thing, but I will mention that you're going to need some kind of focus to be able to remove this shield. Now, there's a really good character for Rift of Chaos water boss, and that is Elise. Now, Elise actually doesn't need any kind of focus to remove or steal buffs. So she's great for this mechanic because you don't even have to worry about it. It's just automatically built into her kit. So from stages 5 and up, I believe the boss does get this Primal Fury, which is on all of the bosses. It says at the start of round 15, it gains Berserk. It just has a bunch of damage. I will say that the water boss, because of this Frozen Seal mechanic and being able to deflect this back and reduce its damage by 30%, there is 1 or 2 rounds that you can survive even if the boss is in the Berserk mode, if you go that route. And if you're using Ackerly, you don't even have to worry about getting to round 15. It's going to be over way before that. So, another effect, it says deal huge damage to the enemy with the highest max health, and if the enemy is controlled, launches a bonus attack. This is the same exact thing as the Earth Titan. Basically, your highest health hero will get hit with this big damage dealing ability, and if they're frozen, it's going to launch a bonus attack with someone with the lowest max health. But again, you should be building your heroes, especially your highest max health hero, with that 210 resistance, so it's never getting frozen. And then that way you don't have to worry about the exploding icicle. So we're almost at the end here. So Arctic Beam, it says deals damage to all enemies and applies the stun bomb. Again, this is the same exact thing that you have with all of the bosses. They apply that stun, so you need someone to cleanse this, or you're going to die. That doesn't apply to all heroes because there are some heroes that have damage reduction abilities in their kits, but it is 100% needed in regards to cleansing to deal with this stun bomb and freezes and anything else like that. The nice thing is the people that cleanse in the earth element also heal your team members up. So it kind of goes hand in hand, like I said, more overlapping, which is kind of nice. You want to come in? Okay, and then the last ability is Frost Storm. It says deals huge damage to all enemies and gains attack up. Damage is evenly distributed across all enemies and reduced by 5% per one positive effect on the enemy. So this ability, again, it kind of plays into if you have more positive effects, it's going to deal a lot less damage. This is his highest damage ability outside of the single target damage to your max health hero, the big kind of single target nuke. So the more positive effects you have on your team, the better. I will say that if you are bouncing back the Frozen Seal debuff to this boss, this Frost Storm doesn't deal a whole lot of damage. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the teams, some of the compositions, basically what they're doing, and then I can show you some of this stuff that I've been talking about. Okay, so from a team composition standpoint, obviously in here you're going to see a lot of Ackerley teams, right? So Ackerley pairs with a lot of people. In regards to, you'll see a Foodie here. Foodie is here to heal, because if your team can stay alive long enough, the Ackerley poisons will stack up really quickly and, kill the boss pretty quick. So if they don't have Jocasta, or if they need to use Jocasta in other rifts, like Earth Rift, which is a really, popular place for Jocasta, then Foodie is also another option. It also goes without mentioning that Foodie can transfer the Frozen Seal debuff back to the boss as well, which is really cool. So she fills the role of Jocasta that does some kind of cleansing as well as healing, and bouncing the Frozen Seal back on the boss, similar to Seema. So this is a team, that is trying to survive with the Frozen Seal mechanic and using Elise as the main damage dealer. So Elise does really good damage with her max health ability that she gets whenever her rage is at 3. It replaces her basic skill with You're Out. So a really strong skill, and then obviously paired with the Light Twin, she's able to do that attack twice. So it's really big damage, which is really cool. But Jocasta's in here, to cleanse the bomb. Same thing with Foodie, and then transfer the Frozen Seal. This is another team that, again, is just dealing damage. It's really not focusing on the Frozen Seal at all. It's probably just built with high resistance or enough buffs coming from the Light Twin, as well as the max health buff from Hakron. And then you also have some heal over time buffs as well as like defense up and immunity from Jocasta as well. So this one probably doesn't have to deal with Frozen too much just because of all the positive effects. So this is a team that I've used in the past. This was to show that people could actually do the Water Rift without Shane. Shane can replace Rachel as well, but Rachel is a really nice hero. Because she's a damage dealer, she can remove that big shield that we were talking about. And then on top of that, she actually brings some nice heals to your team. So if you're struggling to stay alive, it's another additional heal that you can bring along with Jocasta. But here, the Seema is a really important role player because she does transfer the Frozen Seal back to the boss. The only bummer with teams like this is all of your heroes need to be 210 resistance, which is really tough. It's definitely not the most ideal way to build a team, but you can get the job done. Now, I'm going to jump into my my Water Rift of Chaos team, and I'll show you why the resistance is so important just by explaining this in action. But the main thing that you need to realize is even though Seema, even though she deflects the Frozen Seal and Frozen and the bombs back on the boss, the problem is she only transfers one per turn. So in order to transfer the Frozen Seal back to the boss, all other debuffs need to be resisted. And I'll show you that whenever he puts up the bomb, because the bomb is unresistible. You'll see that Seema actually only deflects back like one of the bombs and doesn't deflect back the Frozen Seal. So let's just jump in there. I'll show you that real quick, and then we'll get out of here. All right, be right back. All right, so we're on the boss here, and you see he's putting up his big shield. And all of these things, we have our buffs up. So all of us resisted here, and that's where you have the counterattack from Seema. Okay? So this is really important because you want these stacks to always be at 3. So here, all resists, and then Seema will shoot back the Frozen Seal, all 3. Now you'll see though, whenever it comes to the boss putting up the bomb, on the turns that he puts up the bomb, she won't get this to 3 stacks because the bomb is the thing that gets deflected. So here, you'll see one of these 3 people will have this bomb deflected. So it came off of Jocasta, and the Frozen Seals are still at 2. So whenever that takes place, Seema won't deflect that. So it'll be the same thing with Freeze. That's why all members of your team need to have enough resistance to make sure that you're reflecting the Frozen Seal. Now, maybe that's not an issue. Maybe you can survive without it being at 3 stacks all the time. But for this team, for me, it needs to be at 3 stacks. So that is something to pay attention to. And Seema or Foodie, they need enough focus to deflect this. All right? So I just wanted to walk over that. So that's the little guide here, guys, on the water boss. I hope this helps, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.